Ladies and gentlemen, the famous Miss Doris Day has gladly consented to sing a few songs for us tonight.
Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera.
This is Foreign Correspondence. Deeper into Hitchcock.
Hello and welcome. This is 43rd episode of Foreign Correspondence Deeper into Hitchcock. My name is Sebastian Smoliński and I'm joined as always by my co-host
Michał Oleszczyk. Hello.
We are going deeper and delving deeper into Hitchcock's oeuvre. We've discussed many of his great 1950s movies, and this time Hitchcockian remake, the most famous among Hitchcockian remakes, perhaps the only one genuine remake, The Man Who Knew Too Much from 1956, a story about American family that begins in Marrakesh, then we go to London, and basically follow James Stewart and Doris Day trying to find their son, who is kidnapped by evil forces, by evil people, definitely. I'm very happy that we can discuss this film almost 70 years after it was released. 1956 was the year of the release. And I'm wondering, Michał, what do you think about this Hitchcock gem? It's a mature Hitchcock, very professional Hitchcock, almost late Hitchcock, we could say slowly, right?
Yes, we are definitely entering the late phase in this podcast, which makes me a little bit nostalgic, melancholic, but let's enjoy it while it lasts. This is a film that basically, I think, is perfect as a mid-1950s big entertainment, a film that was shot in VistaVision, so this very special widescreen process, recently resurrected by Brady Corbett in The Brutalist, and it's a Technicolor production with huge stars, James Stewart and Doris Day, and she is singing an Oscar-winning song, Que Sera Sera. So, and it takes place in Marrakesh and in London. So, it's this big splashy entertainment. And of course, we talked about the first film on this podcast many moons ago. It may be useful to remember that Hitchcock toyed with this idea of reviving this old film for a while, even in the 40s, and this version comes in the middle of the 50s, of this very affluent American decade, at the time when Hitchcock, I think, thinks of himself as this living classic almost. When I watch this film, I feel this power that Hitchcock has, that he's the producer of his films, he's the driving force of these films. He can make them on this very white canvas with huge stars, and I feel like he's in his element. So I like the film for this reason, that it's sort of Hitchcock at the top of his game. Actually, a piece of trivia, Hitchcock became an American citizen on the set of this film when he was, let's say he finished it as an American director, fully American citizen. And this film also has some of this American post-war hubris, that is all about America. These Americans abroad, we will talk about them. Ben McKenna and Joe Conway McKenna and their son Hank, they are like the epitome of Americans who feel on the top of the world. They are ignorant about other cultures. They don't know anything about Morocco when they are there. Of course, the character of James Stewart, he was stationed there during World War II. So we have, this recent history is spelled out. But when you look at them, and when you see this, doctor from Indianapolis, Indiana, traveling freely between Paris and Morocco and London and stuff. What I'm trying to say, I think that this film projects this kind of American maybe contentment with their culture, with their political power, and yet, of course, this power is being questioned because this family, as relaxed as they are actually in danger. The kid is kidnapped, and this whole affluence and self contentment proves to be very fragile. And I think that this fragility is actually what makes this film interesting. When this family unit dissolves between our eyes, the child is taken away, there are tensions within the marriage, and it turns out that this is not such a powerful, couple or a perfect marriage. There's something sinister going on. So to answer your question finally, I like the film. I like the entertainment quality of it, and it's not my favorite Hitchcock by any means, but I think that he senses something about this cultural moment, and he, at the same time, projects American power and questions it in a way in this film.
I think it's a great. These are great observations. I totally agree. That's why I suggested we are entering this late Hitchcock phase, when also the manner, the style, it also starts to be a theme in itself. Hitchcock style, for example, prolonged scenes of looking for the child in London, very moderate pace. Bernard Herrmann's music, which I think is very similar in Vertigo in certain scenes. I should, let's say, check it with some music scholars, but some tunes of James Stewart walking and pondering. So we are entering this in this way. Some of these scenes are like a trance, but this lateness is a feature here also, of course, because when we compare with the previous movie, which was much shorter, simpler, faster, we sense this opulence. And of course the climax in Albert Hall is this huge opulent scene, which is like a visual spectacle in itself. Right, maybe even not so much about suspense, but very much about Hitchcock photographing certain spectacle and grandeur. And I think your observations about Americanness are very to the point. I think casting is brilliant here, pretty unexpected. I'm not sure, but I think it's the only movie in which the James Stewart and Doris Day star together, and they are both not only great Hollywood stars of the period, but also they are both unusually earthly or down-to-earth American stars of the period, right? They both stand for not only America, but this kind of American culture which is no nonsense, common sense, and approachable in a way. Although maybe it's a different case with Doris Day, but when I was rewatching this movie, I was thinking about Calamity Jane and her star turn as a Western star in a musical Western. So this is definitely interesting, and this fragility I sense it too. I would like us to discuss the scene of dragging Doris Day, which I think epitomizes much of what we're discussing. I think it's a fascinating moment. But even besides that, this idea that Americans are traveling in the 50s, it's part of a bit like To Catch a Thief, right? This part of spectacular global trips by planes, tourism is spreading, also this notion of 1950s family of men, like in these photographs from the 50s when we see common humanity in different cultures. It's definitely here. I was wondering, for example, if we can say that James Stewart really establishes the bond with the boy, right? The boy is supposedly at the center here, but I think there is some distance between the boy and the father, for example, right? So like these patterns of 1950s nuclear family are repeated here. But my question is, maybe if I may ask you a question, do you consider this film to be in a way a family melodrama? I think you mentioned that in indirect way, because I was looking at Hitchcock's filmography, and I think I was looking for the previous moment when we had a normal family, let's say a regular family, meaning 2 adults and a child. And I think I had to get back to Shadow of a Doubt to see a family in a Hitchcock movie, which is striking because family is one of the most basic themes in all kinds of stories and Hollywood cinema, but we don't have families in Hitchcock's 1950s movies, previous ones, like a functioning family or any kind of family unit that would resemble nuclear family hailed in the 1950s. But we have in this film, which is, I think it's an exception, and I was thinking about The Man Who Knew Too Much in connection with family melodrama of the 50s.
Oh, so many interesting points. But I would say that, yes, it is a fascinating take on the family unit. Many of earlier Hitchcock projects were comedies in the deep sense. They ended with marriage, so the family came after, right? Like in Rear Window. It was a little bit about the evasion of marriage, and here we start with a family, which is interesting. I was also thinking about Shadow of the Doubt because if you think about it, it's only 12 years that separate those two films. And yet those families couldn't be more different, because when I think of those 2 extremely intelligent young daughters in the family in Shadow of the Doubt, Teresa Wright and her bookish small sister, they are extremely intelligent, and when you compare them to this stupid kid in Man Who Knew Too Much, who is really almost, I don't know if you remember Billy Wilder's 7-Year Itch, but then there you also have this 1950s American kid, who only reads comics books, he dresses up as a sci-fi.
Like a Frank Tashlin stereotype.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying, that this kid Hank in this film is exactly like that. That he's a little bit obnoxious, not overtly so, but you can sense that he was bred and on a pure diet of American pop culture. And I think for Hitchcock, it's a problem. And this is one point that I wanted to make, that in this decade, I think, and Hitchcock looks at this Eisenhower era America and probably looks at its young people and satirizes them a little bit. And of course, he will explode the family dynamics in Psycho, where the son, is the killer.
But also, it's this family. It's his audience. It's supposedly it's his audience. I don't know if 7-year-olds were watching The Man Who Knew Too Much back then. I think yes, they some of them did, but it's his audience of his movies,
and definitely the audience of his TV show. That's also to be remembered. But he wouldn't be the first artist who held his audience in contempt. A little bit. But a much more important point was made by you earlier when you mentioned the drugging scene, which is very controversial, because I also remember. When I spoke to Dan Salit, who I hope we will have as our guest one day, he told me that in the 70s that scene was extremely criticized by feminist-oriented critics, because basically the whole scene is about taking away the agency from Doris Day, because it's, Ben, James Stewart, assumes that she is so emotional that the second she will learn that her child was abducted, she will become hysterical. So he has to sedate her before he gives her the news of the abduction. So the implication is that a woman is not capable of handling her own composure and emotions. And this scene is fascinating. We know that it was much longer in the script, and Hitchcock, a little bit, he made it a little bit leaner. But for me, and I just want to make this point because I think that actually this film is about that. The whole film is about this conflict within marriage. The doctor figure, who it is stressed in the film, is the breadwinner of this family, because there's this whole conversation about, the tonsils of Mr. Smith will pay for this trip. So he is the breadwinner. The wife resigned from her artistic career in order to enter this traditional role of a wife and a mother, and she resents it because she made a huge sacrifice. We know that her audience loved her and still loves her because they welcomed her in London. But what I'm saying is this: he calls her irrational, and he tells her that, you have to take this pill because you cannot handle your emotions. Then when she enters this hotel Savoy in London, a friend of hers looks at them both and says, "Oh, I hope your kid is as beautiful as you, and it has the doctor's brains," right? So it's assumed that the man is more rational. He thinks he's more rational. But the whole film says something else. She is more rational from the first scene on the bus when, the doctor is telling all the secrets to Louis Bernard. And she is the first to notice that, you were very careless with this man. You told him all the information that he needed. Then it is her who actually understands this whole Ambrose Chapel thing. She figures it out, that it's not a person and it's actually a place. So scene after scene, she is the most more rational, which is interesting because basically the whole setup of this family and of this order rests on the idea that it is the man who has the forces of reason. But actually, she is much more rational than him. So I think that's a nice subversive way of Hitchcock, saying to this very traditional, puritanical, patriarchal America, saying that, those wives that you so cheerfully put in their homes as homemakers. In the 50s, we are in the era of Eisenhower, when, those wives were in the suburbs and stuff. He says, maybe you should listen to them because they're actually smart and they're actually more rational than you. By the way, and I will never accept it in this film, I never bought this whole Ambrose Chapel thing. I remember when I first watched it as a 12-year-old...
Isn't it a famous place?
No, I mean, but when I watched it first as a 12-year-old Polish boy, the first thing when I heard that Ambrose Chapel, I thought that is a chapel, right? And this whole plot point with them taking an hour to figure it out, I never bought it. I still not buying it. I think it's a bad idea.
I totally agree. You could probably defend it by saying, this is part of their glorious American ignorance. That maybe this term sounds English and they treat it as a name. I think you touched upon very important thing here. We even have this bit of dialogue why they are staying in Indiana, and justification is pretty weak. The doctor is saying, I have my patients there, I don't have them in New York. So there is this Indianapolis with all the suburban style, suburban culture you were mentioning, and New York, which would be a promise of kind of a fulfillment of her or realization of her talent. Definitely it's there. But also I would add one thing. I think, yes, she is maybe more rational, but I think what Hitchcock is telling us in this and other movies, rationality is also not the way, right, to solve problems. And what I like about this film so much is how it is in this beautiful dialogue in terms of reversal with Rear Window, in which it was James Stewart who was paranoid, in quotation marks, paranoid, suspicious of everything, devising stories of improbable murder by his neighbor, which of course turned out to be a fact in terms of the world of the movie. And here it's opposite, which also shows us how James Stewart could change registers. And I think let's say if Rear Window was the thesis, this is kind of antithesis. In Vertigo, we have both, a kind of multifaceted James Stewart, right? So in Rear Window, he could be suspicious. Here, he's so careless, he's almost stupid, right? He's, oh, no, why are you bothering? I mean, these are normal people. And of course, thanks to Hitchcock's camera, thanks to gestures and acting, we, as well as Doris Day, immediately sense that something is wrong. So there is this part of rationality, but I think it's, as many other Hitchcock movies, it's also about this feeling or intuition that something is off, and she perfectly feels that. And this scene of dragging, yes, this is exactly what you said. It's a very striking scene today. I think if contemporary audience would watch and discuss this movie, this would be the scene that would raise some concern, especially and even for Hitchcock fans, because when we look at his oeuvre, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's not a single scene of dragging that would be beneficial for protagonist, right? Suspicion. We have this milk with supposed poison. Notorious, when our heroine is drugged, right? There's always signals that something is wrong, that someone wants to harm you. So I think if we even put it in this otherist context, that there is another scene of, let's say, drugging or medication, in Hitchcock's universe, it always means that someone wants to control you, and it's never good. So I think that's also a powerful thing, and that's why also I suggested that there are these codes of melodrama here, because what you mentioned is he has to contain her, because otherwise we would have Douglas Sirk, we would have All That Heaven Allows, but even the other one, which is the most...
Written on the Wind.
Yes, exactly. We would have this kind of emotionality. This is partially the argument of Murray Pomeranz in his BFI book on the film. He suggests that without this dragging scene, she would explode and we wouldn't have the explosion in Albert Hall. The striking moment when she's screaming. We don't really know why exactly she's screaming at that precise moment. She doesn't know the shot will happen at that moment.
Yeah, but I mean, I did read this passage from Pomeranz's book, which I'm not a fan of this book. I think it's a little bit contrived. But what he doesn't give the answer why is she actually screaming. I mean, I always took it that she screams because she knows in which box the murderer is. She saw the murderer downstairs. He approached her, so she knows where he's sitting. And my assumption is that when he, takes his gun and there's this long shot, which is very, I think I can imagine young Brian De Palma,
very mannerist.
Yeah, getting off on this shot, this is it, very mannerist shot of this very, very glistening in the dark, gun. I assume that she screams because she knows that he will shoot in a second, but I don't know. I mean,
but she's not supposed to know that there will be a shooting.
Yeah, she doesn't know that it's supposed to come at the crash of the cymbals. She doesn't know that. Anyhow, this is one of the problems that I have with the book by Pomeranz. But just one more thing about this scene of dragging. This scene was much more sinister in the script, and this is the book that I always recommend. I also recommended in this episode on Trouble with Harry. Steven De Rosa, Writing with Hitchcock, the collaboration of Alfred Hitchcock and Joe Michael Hayes. Fascinating book. And Hitchcock, this is a quotation from the book. Hitchcock was also very concerned about the scene in which Ben sedates Jo and then tells her their son has been kidnapped. Hitchcock felt that some of Jo's dialogue, written by Hayes, like, "I could kill you, he's my child more than yours, I had him, and I'll never forget this, dragging your own wife," was too melodramatic, and asked Hayes to keep it meaty while eliminating some of Jo's more histrionic lines. But this shows that this scene was supposed to be very dark, this was the heart of darkness of this marriage, basically, this scene. She's saying that she's more of a mother to Hank than he's the father and stuff. And he minimized it. But I think the tension is still there. And it'll be interesting, to see what Douglas Sirk, you said, would make with this material. But let's just mention that Brenda De Benzie, who plays Mrs. Drayton, so the kidnapper actually, in the end she lets Hank go. This is a very important scene in the film, which I think it's not commented enough, that actually at the very end, when Jo is singing in the embassy and Hank hears her, and this is, the call to action, actually the kidnapper finally lets the boy go because of her maternal feelings. The whole film hinges on maternal feelings, and in a way, Mrs. Drayton acts completely irrationally because she acts against her own interests. Probably she will be killed for that, but still she wants this boy to go. She wants this boy to leave. And if you want to read a highly emotional interpretation of this scene, I remember this book by Robin Wood, Hitchcock's Films Revisited. There is a whole chapter on men who knew too much, and Robin Wood is very, very emotional about this moment. He says that it's the most feminine moment in Hitchcock, that it's this pure force of femininity that, is unleashed and actually breaks through the walls and releases this kid. So it's an interesting thing, and especially with Doris Day, the screen mother of America in 1950s. She was the epitome of good mother on the screen. One could probably, write an essay just about the image of the mother in this film and others, because we do remember that many mothers in Hitchcock are problematic. They are controlling of their sons, Stranger of the Train, Psycho. Here, it's the pure positive representation of motherhood, I think, and we should note that.
That's a good point. I wonder if it's not because she's not a real mother. So perhaps in these terms, if she's missing something or there's a lack of something, it's easier for her to behave like a mother because she's not one. In a convoluted way, maybe. But besides that, I really like this performance. I think it's my favorite performance, Brenda de Benzi. I think she's fantastic because she's both a bit eerie, a bit sinister, but also helpless and, as you mentioned, touching in this particular scene. And I think it's a very interesting bit of casting. I haven't seen her in any other movie.
I think I saw her somewhere, but I don't remember where, actually. I should have checked that. Yes, I like that character too. And there's one more thing that I wanted to ask you about, is the political dimension of this film, which is kind of strange because we are in the middle of Cold War. It's 1955, 1956, and this ambassador, this is who is supposed to, prime minister, the prime minister who is supposed to be killed. He is a prime minister of a non-existing country. And when you watch this film, you have no idea what is it all about. I mean, we are in Cold War. Actually, again, from the Stephen DeRosa book, we know that when Hitchcock was developing the treatment with Angus MacPhail, they were writing it as if it were Hungarian prime minister. That was the time when Hungary was trying to tear itself away from the Soviet influence. So they imagined that this is the Hungarian anti-Soviet prime minister who comes to London, and the Russians killed him. And all the scenes were written for a Russian embassy. Then they changed it, and yet they retained the French Morocco. So you have one half of this film, which is placed squarely in a very concrete Cold War reality of this, colonial Africa and stuff. And then the second half of the film, which is quote unquote about nothing. Because what is the interest of France with this non-existing country? I mean, I'm just saying it's an interesting evasion. Will it be only until Topaz that Hitchcock will be interested enough to tackle the actual politics of the day? Because we saw him do it in Foreign Correspondent, in those war films, and here it's let's tell a story of political assassination, but it's the prime minister of of non-existing country. How was it? Just marketing decision?
So definitely in North by Northwest we have kind of fun with evasion. Torn Curtain would be a bit more specific. But here I was also wondering about transparency of post-war colonial situation for Hitchcock, right? I remember an essay by Charles Barr about Hitchcock somehow prefiguring post-coloniality in, I think it was Bon Voyage, which had like one protagonist was black, and I don't remember the argument very well, but Professor Barr suggested Hitchcock's sensitivity to these issues, and here I was wondering why Marrakesh of all places? Because it's exotic, because it's full of light, because in the first The Man Who Knew Too Much we have snow, we have coldness, this more, let's say, more elite place of a ski resort and so on. So maybe it's basically the difference, but I don't know why it's solved like that. I think maybe my only idea would be that we need to have Marrakesh as a touristic location. So this has to be named, but naming the country of the plot would kind of draw us away from the psychological drama that is unfolding in the movie. But it's like a movie split in half between pre-war Hitchcock, which was metaphorical about, for example, the Balkans, right? The setting in the Balkans, and 60s Hitchcock that would be more directly Cold War.
It's a fascinating progression, actually, with this Hitchcock, dipping his toe into this political relevance. As long as he had Second World War as an umbrella, it was safe for him to, very clearly say who is who and stuff, like Foreign Correspondent, for example, or Lifeboat. And here he's like completely on the fence. And I have the suspicion that Morocco is simply chosen because it's this quote-unquote exotic location. 1950s, as Foster Hirsch beautifully wrote in his book, is full of those films that like on CinemaScope and VistaVision, and they are all over the place in those beautiful sunlit exotic locations like Bovani Junction, or there are so many examples.
And ancient epics, right? Which wouldn't be out of place in Marrakesh.
Absolutely. Mogambo, African Queen, and stuff. So here... But I have also one more sinister suspicion, is that probably there was some calculation saying, we shouldn't name this minister, this prime minister, because political situation may change, it may date very quickly. Maybe in 10 years from now, who knows what the situation will be with Hungary or whatever. However, Hitchcock is pretty sure of himself that the colonial dominance of North Africa will remain, like basically, this is okay, like this Arabs and French people, basically dominate them, this probably will stay. So I think this is this colonial bone in Alfred Hitchcock's body, which of course he was, born in colonial empire, saying that no, it's safe, like this Marrakesh will always be about, this colorful markets and funny Arabs and stuff. So I think it's a little bit, you can sense this colonial superiority even in the scene of eating, like, cannot we just have this chicken in a normal way? Do we have to eat with those fingers? I think Hitchcock there's a little bit of a blind spot there.
Absolutely, I totally agree. It's fully transparent and beautiful in To Catch a Thief. I mean, Hitchcock making a spectacle, a beautiful vision of Côte d'Azur. It's different because we are in the West. But here, of course, I think we won't be dwelling on that. But if one were to, let's say, tick some boxes of exotic representation, that would definitely be it, including Muslims singing from towers, beautiful Arabian Nights, skies, and all this equipment, but which is, I think, rendered lovingly, but of course it is full of cliches, even if they are very beautiful in Hitchcock's interpretation.
Absolutely, and you just made me realize one thing. The whole plot is set off into motion by Hank unwittingly tearing off the face veil of this Muslim woman, and by the anger of the man. And the anger of the man is the patriarchal anger of, his woman being exposed for others. She, suddenly by tearing off this veil, some rule of female submission was violated. And the whole film actually shows that Ben McKenna is just as prejudiced in his approach to his wife. She should be at home. She cannot possibly have a career when he is a doctor at Indianapolis. So in a way, this, Hitchcock shows us that this American marriage is just as, oppressive in its own way as this first marriage, the Muslim woman. But I just want to comment on something that you said much earlier. I completely agree that some of the musical cues are vertigo-ish. You can definitely sense it, like under the surface. It's crawling there, it wants to get out. And I will surprise you. My favorite scene in the film, I don't know why.
First Ambrose Chapel?
No. First Ambrose Chapel? No. It's fun. It's almost like an Ealing comedy, this whole scene. And actually, Angus MacPhail wrote Whiskey Galore, so that figures. But I like this. But this whole strange interlude, this hotel moment, before they go, they're about to go to dinner. And Louis Bernard is in the room. Hank is eating his dinner. Mrs. McKenna is, finishing off her beautiful attire. And there's this very strange light in this scene. It's like the muezzin is singing in the background. It's all like this balmy evening. It's right before this character of Rien, which
I think he's unnamed in the movie.
Rien means actually nothing. Yeah. So, but he's played by Reggie Nadler. And there's something supremely sinister about this scene because Joe is still suspicious. She still asks Louis all those questions. He doesn't answer. There's this mysterious phone call and this muezzin singing. And in this scene, there's this tiny little voice. I mean, there's this theme by Bernard Herrmann playing very, very quietly. And it's a very disquieting theme. And I think this is Hitchcock at his absolute best because this is supposedly a normal scene of everyday life, but you can sense that something is about to invade. And when she opens the door and the camera makes this jump to Rian's face, and it's a scary face, and they all react, by like they are taken aback. I think this is supreme Hitchcock filmmaking, and there's even a green nightstand lamp which bathes Louis Bernard in green light, which, of course, green light will come back in Vertigo. So I think this is a very, very stylized, beautiful, disquieting moment. By far my favorite scene in the film. Do you have a favorite moment in the film?
Yeah, I think I do, but I like this scene a lot. Everything you're saying, definitely, this is a great scene because, as you mentioned, it is normal, but on the other hand, the stranger is now dressed up and in their apartment. Yeah. So there is both, casualness of this moment. Of course, you can invite someone to your hotel room, but on the other hand, they are very close, and she's not comfortable with that, which gives the scene additional pleasure. And I also love blocking in the scene. This is you mentioned when they open the door, the way Hitchcock blocks the shot of our protagonists looking at that man who's standing at the threshold. I just love the classical power of that. He's situating actors in such a way to make this composition striking and a bit unsettling, right? Something's going on. It's not normal, oh, who's there? It's like there is some distance, some phantom presence. So I definitely like the scene. I have a problem with Reggie Nalder's treatment by Hitchcock. It's his he was a man with scars from his treatment, and it is exploited by Hitchcock. I don't know really why. I know he needs to be sinister, but wouldn't just his face and light, wouldn't it do all the work? Do we have to have like close up on his face to somehow emphasize his sinister nature and emphasize that he's not as that his skin is not as beautiful as James Stewart's skin? I wonder, but it's just a trivia, maybe just a different sensibility. But I must say, I like one particular shot, which is totally artificial, but I think that's why we love classical movies as well. When they are leaving the chapel and Doris Day is in the background, and she doesn't know they're leaving the chapel. I just love this shot because it's very stylized. It's special effects, composite, and we have like these two tracks, like something is happening and she doesn't see that. So I like this moment, and I must say I really like the bit of slapstick at Ambrose Chapel, because it's totally out of the blue. It's totally a sequence you can even cut out of the movie. I mean, it doesn't serve any purpose. Mary Pomeranz would say that it introduces the theme of bestiality and father-son relations, which makes sense, but in any case, it's like outrageous. It's like this deleted sequence from the script of North by Northwest. There was supposed to be the scene in a factory, in a car factory, and Cary Grant was supposed to open the door of one of the cars, and a corpse was supposed to drop out of the car, right? So it's like this moment in this crafted, a bit mannerist film, 2-hour Hitchcock spectacular. We have this outrageous and I would say also purely comedic scene which introduces this theme of taxidermy, which is also a bit unsettling and will be further used by Hitchcock in Psycho. So I like this scene. Yeah,
I like it too, and the interesting thing was that supposedly Hitchcock was considering to cast Alistair Sim as Ambrose Chapel, which would have made it even more into Ealing comedy. I just want to say one more thing, and that's probably it for me. That I love one idea here, and it's fantastic comedy of those friends who come to Savoy Hotel. They want to spend the time with McKenna's, and they are left there because, the McKenna's are in the middle of a thriller plot, and those friends wanted just to hang out. So I love the ending, the last seconds of the film, when they come back and they say, "Oh, we just, I'm sorry for all the waiting, but we needed to pick up Hank."
And this is the last shot.
Yeah, this is the last shot, and this is like the movie ends, and this is pure Hitchcock in his British vein of this brisk pace, sudden ending, and just throwing off this joke at the very end. I love it, and I love every scene with those friends, being sophisticated and wanting to have cocktails and chit chat, and here is Doris Day and James Stewart just popping in and out because they are in a thriller movie, and those friends are more like in a cocktail party or I don't know, a novel by Evelyn Waugh, so it's perfect. I love it. It's one of the best things about this film is this set of friends, those glitterati in the hotel.
Oh, absolutely, and this is just one shot. I mean, this is amazing. There are no additional setups. This is the last scene, the last moment, like the last joke, like the last punch, and I was amazed by the swiftness of it in this pretty long movie. So as we're coming slowly to the end, let us just briefly discuss the most opulent scene. Do you respond to the cantata sequence, which is like the most lavish, the most prepared, storyboarded, the longest sequence in the movie? My wife, with whom I was watching the movie yesterday, she said she loved it. She likes this sequence a lot. I'm not sure if I really like it. I think I've never kind of could really respond to it. What do you think as a huge Hitchcock set piece?
I don't have a big problem with it, but I think it is a little bit disappointing for me in its duration. It's very long. I don't think it generates this much suspense. I liked how it was played out in the first film, which was much quicker. But I do think that this is probably the sequence that gave us Brian De Palma. Because I think that De Palma sequences, those big sequences, are always like this. They're also too long. There's also this stretching of time. And just for the record, I love De Palma. But I think that when De Palma does a Hitchcock sequence, he does basically this sequence, which...
But he does it better in a way.
He does it, yeah, I think he does it better. In Carlito's Way or...
Femme Fatale, the opening half an hour.
Yes.
Yeah, I love De Palma as well. So,
but I think this is with the close up on the gun and with her screaming. It's very prolonged. I'm not a huge fan of this sequence. I think that Hitchcock has better sequences, but I like it. I mean, there's Bernard Herrmann as himself, but I didn't read the second half of the Murray Pomeranz book, so I don't know the deep meanings of the cantata.
I mean, I'm not sure if there are like deep meanings, let's say, excavated from it, but Murray Pomeranz emphasizes generally the role of musicality and sounds in the whole movie, right? That like just treating this film as we tend to do with most Hitchcock movies, mainly on this visual plane, is not enough, right? Because Doris Day singing or listening to music, how the music builds up, how it's connected, how, for example, the sound of the gun it becomes part of the orchestra and so on, like all these considerations of music. Or, for example, he also, I think, his comments about how the sound of Hank is different, when he's speaking through the phone, that there is this distance. All these like audial considerations, I think, are pretty interesting. But I think there is no theory behind cantata. I think it's like Hitchcock. But I think it's also, in a way, another love letter to London, right? He's taking this grand location and he films it almost as if he were filming an episode from This is Cinerama, right? With, these rows and rows of musicians, which really looks spectacular. And it looks better than, let's say, contemporary movies trying to shoot an orchestra precisely because of VistaVision process and so on. So yeah, I think in this sense it's still impressive, but I totally agree with you. I prefer the Palma set pieces to Hitchcock set pieces. I think he's better in other places, but also this whole method of making movies that they are building restaurant, they are building the chapel. Always when I'm watching classical movies, I think that's just amazing. Everything built from scratch.
Yeah, and I just hope that one day I will see this film properly projected from a VistaVision print. I would love, because I do think that it has to be a different experience. I mean, this film was conceived for this huge screen. Again, we recommend this book by Foster Hirsch when he makes you realize that those screens then were huge, and they usually were bigger than the screens that we are accustomed to now. I mean, apart from IMAX, but this had to look spectacular. It's like projected, VistaVision. So I'm sure the sequence plays better when you watch it on a huge screen. So I would say that I like this film. It's not a major masterpiece for me, and I would love to watch it one day properly projected with great stereophonic sound. So hopefully we'll get to that one day.
I would love that too. And this was another episode of our podcast. Please review us, write us a comment or an email. We're always happy to know how you like what we're doing. We'll be continuing our Hitchcock adventure. Now Hitchcock will choose to do something different. The Wrong Man will be in a different key. Are you looking forward to revisiting that one? When have you watched this movie for the last time?
I saw The Wrong Man about 25 years ago. So I'm definitely looking forward to revisiting it. However, on a sad note, Man Who Knew Too Much marked the end of the creative relationship between John Michael Hayes and Hitchcock. They fell out at the end of this production, mostly because Hitchcock wanted to credit Angus MacPhail for his work, and Hayes didn't want that name on the screen. Anyhow, I think since we are closing this part of our podcast when we talked about their collaboration, there will be a very different tone in The Wrong Man. Let's say it will be more serious and less splashy. We will be back to black and white and one of the more serious films in Hitchcock canon. So yes, I am definitely looking forward to revisiting that with you.
So this and much, much more in the next episode of Foreign Correspondence.
Deeper into Hitchcock.